I watch this on my parents' DVD player in Ohio and weep neon crucifixed into a reflection, even though I know that it's not really me because the girl in the show has no needles caught in her throat, no name other than Fixed. My mother hid the episode from me until it became an island spilling onto my lap. After I started living amongst men who consumed my name as if it had not been hollowed out. I admit I've been mistaken for the gender I'm not and responded with what that's supposed to mean. In an exhausted, defensive way, I told my best friend, I only have X chromosomes, and he asked if it could be cured. Welcome to the Writer's Spotlight on Barren Magazine. We have with us today one of the best poets that I have read in the last several years. He has a new book that is getting ready to come out, and he has been featured previously on Barren Magazine in issue number 7. The name of the book is The Neon Hollywood Cowboy, and the name of the poet is Matt Mitchell. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Brandon. Appreciate it. And thank you for saying such nice things. I'm honored.
Well, you know, I have to be honest, over the last year, it felt like every week I was getting hit with new Matt Mitchells. Every like new things were coming out, like just going. And there was this shadow hanging over all of these releases, the Neon Hollywood Cowboy. It was like, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And so when the date actually you put it out there, I was excited to talk to you about it. And now that I have read it, I am like, can't wait for people to get it in their hands. So let's jump right into this.
Mm-hmm.
John, there's a lot of references in your poetry. John Wayne, Joni Mitchell, Pat Benatar, Stevie Nicks. I mean, I could go on and on. You're kind of an old soul, Matt. I got to know, what do you think your fascination with these eras and figures and pop culture icons that you weren't alive to experience firsthand? What's your connection there with that?
Well, I think that the fascination comes a lot from exposure because, yeah, you're right. I have not lived through 95% of the things I talk about in the book that are references. Like I obviously have lived through everything that has happened to me, but I mean, I grew up in a household.
We're not questioning your life experiences.
This is all fiction. But I mean, I grew up in a household. I'm very pleased to announce that my parents are kind of like old heads. Like they're very much indebted to the things that they lived through and the things that they grew up with. So radio stations, it was always 80s pop or 70s soft rock. And then I don't think I watched a post 1990 movie with my dad until I was in high school. So, I mean, once you are just around these things for so long, they just tend to just seep into the work that you're creating. And I think that it's much easier to communicate everything that I'm living through a world that's already long been established than to try and make some sense of what's going on right now, because it doesn't necessarily fit, I feel like, with my experience.
There's a lot of sense to that, and I think for two reasons. There's this great quote by Kierkegaard that life can only be lived forwards, but it must be understood backwards. And as I have, like so many poets and writers, tried to make sense of the last 12 months of the world, I have found it nearly impossible to really write about it. It's too near. We can't process it yet. So I think it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, to use iconography, genre, and things that have been understood. There's been lots of written about it, so the references are more relatable. I think that makes a lot of sense. The other reason I think your answer is pretty astute is because your parents appear in your poetry a lot. And I think that connection, it's kind of important, because sometimes it's like negative, but sometimes, or I don't want to say negative, but it's antagonistic, or there's a tension and a struggle. So to know now, talking to you, that these things, all of this iconography is something else they handed down to you, not just biological things, but they handed these things down to you, and all those things make you up, is a pretty powerful image and pretty powerful thing. I want to get to the next question here. In the poem in which Tyler, the creator, drops Igor, and did I say that right, by the way? Is it Igor or Igor?
Igor.
Igor. I knew
Igor,
I was going
but
to say it the
yeah.
wrong way. uh,
I've
but
heard it said both ways when it comes to the character from Frankenstein, but I've only heard it as Igor in terms of the album that
the
Tyler the Creator
album,
put out. So
right?
yeah.
Well, and you follow that up by saying, and we go get some hot dogs to celebrate. In the poem, you say the first day of summer doesn't come until Jesse, Alex, and I hit up this hot dog joint in the next town over. So I have two questions, very important, that are purely born out of my own curiosity. And one, is this about the hot dog shop in Warren, Ohio?
Yes, it is. It's not about Jib Jab. It's
Whoa!
not about Jib Jab. Okay, so I
Good.
mean,
I'm not the
I
jib jab guy,
apologize.
hot dog shop
I
guy.
apologize to any non-Northeast Ohio viewers on this interview who are like, what, probably like, what are these two things? But I mean, I've heard too many people say they're the same. They're not, but it's
Mm-mm.
definitely about the hot dog shop. Um, yeah, the it's a long-standing tradition in my family and now with my friends. Not so much this year, but sort of around the end of May, early June, we'd all get together and sort of and go to the hot dog shop at the beginning of summer and kind of enjoy it.
I mean, the
So
hot
yeah,
dog shop
I
is literally up 3 blocks from here. Like I could, if I wanted to, it's cold out. I mean, I love the hot dog shop. So when I read this, I was like, oh yeah, I know. He's talking about the hot dog shop.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
well, that leads me to my
Yeah.
follow-up question, which is you often go into such great detail about things, naming people like we just talked about,
Hmm.
places across the country that you've been to, but you don't name this one. So my question is, when you're deciding in a poem like this one, not to name it, not to specify it, what goes into your decision making to do that? Did you have a version that it said hot dog shop and you changed it, and why?
I mean, I could lie and say that it was intentional that I didn't name drop the hot dog shop, but I can't. I'm not going to do that. Well, I don't know. I wrote so many of these. This poem is written. This whole book, I should say, is written for me, and it's written for intersex people in general. But then you get down to it, and some of the poems are specifically written for other people, and so I tend to go into so much detail because I want the people who are reading it to kind of be able to insert themselves in the poem and understand it, because I think that a lot of readers, when I'm reading, I'm like, okay, how am I going to fit myself into this poem? How am I going to
Mhm.
relate to it?
Yeah.
So usually my details are all about the reader, because I know what I'm talking about. I can be as vague as I want, and I'll get it. But this is one of the few poems in the book where it's just the if the reader understands it, that's good. But I wrote this for my friends, and
Mhm.
this poem is sort of it's mostly a remembrance of a memory, and it hits a little harder because it's the last one that we've had because of COVID. So it's written for them, and if people are like, well, I want to know more about this hot dog place, then I apologize because I
No,
didn't name drop it.
I said it
But the
was
hot dog shop
purely
is
my
great
own
if you're yeah.
curiosity. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
no, it's a great place, and I plan on elaborating more on it in future works, hopefully. That's my goal.
well, to go at a little bit more serious question, I've published two collections of poetry myself, and inside each of them, I found during the experience that I was shedding something in this book.
Hmm.
Like I was putting something in it, I was burying some particular burden in the pages of it as I was kind of pushing it out the door. So, in your own
Right.
words, how would you name what burden you feel like you're shedding in this book?
Well, at like with my gut feeling, I don't know if there's necessarily a burden that I'm trying to shed in the book, but I agree with you. I think that I would say that almost every single book, there's something being taken away. I'm releasing something and moving on. But I think that this book is more of finding a self acceptance and clinging on to it more than losing something. I think that,
Hmm.
but then again, by losing something, you're gaining something. So I'm trying to shed these like standards about masculinity, and I'm trying to shed the way that masculinity and patriarchal types of foundations have been put on me, because I mean I come from a small family, but it's mostly on my dad's side, it's almost all men. Um, so manly things are always in my forefront, and I just don't know how to do those things a lot. And so this book is kind of me trying to chisel away my own new idea of masculinity. And I think that that comes through a little bit in a poem where I just, like, I specifically reference my dad having a little bit of trouble understanding that his son has female chromosomes. I think that that is because I get it from his perspective, but it's also kind of hard. It's kind of
I,
hard to live through that.
yeah.
So I'm trying to find something in this book would be my answer, more than lose something.
Well, that's a perfect segue into my second to last question here, which is there's this clear oscillation of identity and gender running through the entire book. That's clear, and you've stated it even here that who you're writing to is this community at large through yourself and your own experiences. So after returning to these themes many, many times throughout these poems, wrestling with them the way you do you feel like you've hit it, that you uncovered it? Or do you think there's something nagging just beyond that you just haven't reached just yet?
A little bit of both. I think what I wanted to accomplish with this book specifically definitely nailed it. Got what I wanted out of it, and that is understanding a diagnosis, which I think is
It's in your
the
acknowledgments. Yeah.
backbone. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's the backbone of this whole book is being diagnosed as intersex officially, and then trying to wrap my brain around what that means for me as a person. Um, so I mean, I went out and I went to California, the West Coast, for a month in 2019, only maybe a week or two after I'd gotten the official diagnosis. And that's why the book has Hollywood in the title, because a lot of the feelings that I was able to figure out about myself came there. And then I came home and I wrote about it. So I think that in terms of what the Neon Hollywood Cowboy is supposed to be, I think I nailed it, but there's a lot more to figure out. So getting comfortable, being proud in my own body, that's one hurdle. I think I jumped it, and now I've got a couple more hurdles that I got to write about. So I think that, I mean, I told myself like 5 months ago when I started putting the finishing touches on this book that this was the only book I'm going to write about this identity, and I'm going to finally pivot back to writing poems about grandparents and like football for good. And then as I was getting closer to finishing up the manuscript, I realized that's so unrealistic that I don't even know why I entertained that idea. So got more to do, but I think
Well,
I did. I think I nailed it on this book in terms of what I wanted.
it reminds me of a very young version of myself when I was in college at Kent State, and I had a professor named Mage Reagan, and I was working very hard on a poem about death. I had a family member die, and I
Hmm.
was writing about this, and I had gone through many revisions. And he said, "How many revisions are you going to do with this poem?" And I said, "I don't know. I just want this to be my death poem." And he just looked
Yeah.
aghast at me and was like, "Your singular death poem. That's it." He's like, "You're going to write
Yeah.
death poems for the next 30 years of your life. Just move on, son. Just get past and sometimes as poets, we have this
Yeah.
grandiose feeling like this is the work. This is the opus I'm going to
Hmm.
do. But 10 years from now, you're going to have 10 years of more thoughts about your
Exactly.
diagnosis, about the community. So that leads me
Hmm.
to my last question, which is what is next for you? Taking a breather, you gonna lay low for a while, or just promote, or you got something else already on the horizon?
Um, it's like a mixture of all of that, I would say. Definitely in terms of my public life, I am doing mostly promoting right now. I am taking a break from submitting work out. I'm going to try and let my submittable go dry, which is really hard because it feels like
Ooh.
you get down to about 8 or 9 and then you're like, I got to submit more. Um, so that's my attempt. That's my goal, is to let my submittable hit 0 before the end of the year. Hopefully, I guess that really depends on how quick journals respond. But I mean, I'm working on the sequel to this book already.
Nice.
Um, I mean, it's my hopes that it comes out next year. I kind of want to do a back-to-back release in the same way that Back to the Future 2 and 3 came out. So like, yeah, they were written around the same time. They come out in consecutive years. But I mean, I've got a lot. I found when finishing this book that there was a lot that a lot more stuff I wanted to investigate. So I mean, my family is Appalachian. I think we're 6 or 7 generations deep into Appalachian heritage on my father's side of the family, and so I'm hoping to investigate masculinity through Appalachia and also fatherhood, and been writing a lot of poems about infertility a lot, because I think that that's something that I touched on a little bit in the Neon Hollywood Cowboy, but I want to talk about it a little bit more in my next book, because I'm getting to that age where I'm starting to think about having a family, having children, and there are barriers in my life that I have to approach in the next 5 to 10 years of my life. So a lot of stuff to analyze, and but I'm taking it slow. I'm taking a break a little bit.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for talking with us. It's been a pleasure. Where can people find more of your work if they were seeking it out?
If you go to my so my website domain name is kind of like a really hard one to remember. So if you just go to my Twitter, if you go to my Twitter page, which is Matt_Mitchell48, and you click on the link in my bio, that'll take you to my temporary website for right now. It's got some links to some of my recent work. I'm trying to not have a lot of exposure to the work that has already been published that's in this book, so people can just read the book. But I've got some stuff in Hobart, and I've got some stuff in Sporklet that won't see a book, so you can check those out.
Right. And on our very own Barren magazine, Appalachian Gods Don't Believe in Me is not in this book. So if people would like to go back to issue 7 and check out that piece from our magazine, it is there, and it is fantastic. And I think is actually maybe the first or second piece I ever read of yours. It kind of is one of the pieces that originally drew me to like find out, who's this guy. I gotta talk to him. I gotta meet him. He sounds like he's a cool kid. So I would like to close this out by saying people should go to Big Luck Books.
Big Lux, plural.
BigLuxBooks.com. And they can pre-order your book there?
Yeah, it is. The pre-order is dropping any day now.
Okay.
Could be today. I don't know. waiting on my editor to give the green light. We're moving very close to sending the book to print for the first arcs. So,
well, it's by the time this episode drops, everybody, you should be able to go to BigLuxBooks.com and hopefully pre-order Matt's book. If not, follow him on Twitter, because I'm sure he will be posting it up and down there when that hits the green light. Once again, thank you, Matt. And thank you all for tuning in, and subscribe to all of our pages at Barren Magazine, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. If you'd like to watch more of these videos with us, we're going to be posting them even more regularly with some of our featured writers from the past and some that are upcoming in future issues. So we want to thank you, and we'll catch you next time.